Number 8. Zombie fungi. The idea of zombies actually existing in our world via some kind of apocalyptic event has long been dramatized in the world of popular media. No wonder, but the really scary truth of the matter is that there actually is a type of zombie virus among us right now. It attacks all sorts of insects and wildlife in many tropical jungles all over the world. Well, actually, it's not a zombie virus per se, it's actually a zombie fungus. Yes, there is a fungus in the world that turns living creatures into zombies. One of the most common and well-known ones is a fungus in the genus Ophiocordyceps. This well-documented fungus has been known to take over the minds of ants, essentially turning them into mindless zombies that are literally controlled by the spores of the fungus. The zombie fungus evil plan for world domination goes a little like this. First, it will take control of the zombie ant and have it climb up plants as high as it can. Then, the zombie ant will just wait and wait and wait. Then, once the ant dies, the fungus makes the zombie ant basically explode. Boom! This sends the zombie spores all throughout the air and spreads it so the spores can attach to the bodies of other ants and zombify them. Basically, starting a huge zombie ant outbreak. Bleak? Yes, but it's also terrifying just how effective it is. Scientists know this is a super effective zombie epidemic strategy because there have been fossilized zombie ants found from millions of years ago, which goes to show you just how long this zombie ant fungus thing has been going on for. It's funny to think about how this also means that zombies have technically been around way longer than humans. Zombies technically existed before humans were even around to come up with the idea of them. Even scarier, the fungus has apparently evolved over the years, which isn't uncommon for fungi. Now, they have evolved to have even longer lifespans to ensure that they will outlive the lifespan of their poor insect hosts. Although ants are the most common and documented insect to fall victim to this zombie fungus, there's some evidence scientists have found that shows that spiders have also fallen victim to them. Despite the fungus being well known and documented for many years, scientists to this day do not totally understand just how these zombie fungi are able to take control over the minds of ants and other creatures. Perhaps what's even scarier is how that means that something is going on inside the fungus that science just can't explain. Luckily, we think humans don't have to fear this kind of thing happening to us. For now. But who knows? This fungus has been around for so long and is still evolving. Unfortunately, in this case, anything is possible. But for now, because of this and many other reasons, I'm grateful every day that I am not an ant. Comment, "Thank God I'm not an ant," with a praying hands emoji if you're with me. Number 7. Kamikaze horsehair worm. For whatever reason, the idea of parasites and parasitic entities being worms just feels so fitting in certain ways. I mean, it makes sense, mainly because it fits the idea and image of something worming its way into your mind and body and staying there without your permission. And we know that there are so many kinds of worms that exist in our world that are in fact really dangerous and should not be messed with. Especially when they can take over and control your body, like the Kamikaze horsehair worm. Some of these parasitic worms can grow up to a foot long, and they look a bit like a piece of cooked spaghetti. The spaghetti-looking creature's main parasitic targets are crickets and grasshoppers. The Kamikaze horsehair worm uses their bodies to do its bidding. But exactly how it gets into the grasshoppers and crickets is downright terrifying. Because it'll start off as just a tiny baby worm. Then it will get picked up by a mosquito or a fly, but its journey doesn't end there. One of those bugs will then get eaten by the main target, big crickets or grasshoppers. Once that happens, then the parasitic worm's plan really begins. It will start to grow and grow and grow within that bug, feeding off the bug's food and flesh along the way. Normal behavior for a parasite, right? But here's the twist. In order for the worm to complete its ultimate goal, it has to reach and get into a body of water, so it can reproduce and make more vile little creatures. However, crickets and grasshoppers don't normally go into the water. They are very weak swimmers, so the worm forces the poor hosts to essentially drown themselves. By using its abilities to alter the functions of the insect's central nervous system, the worm takes control and forces them to jump into the nearest body of water. The poor insect then drowns itself, allowing the horsehair worm to emerge and finally reproduce. Even more frightening, these insects can be infected by 1, 2, 3, or many more of these parasitic worms, all at the same time. Number 6. Sacculina parasitic castrator barnacles. Barnacles aren't a creature you would normally expect to go and do things like, take over the mind of an innocent creature for its own selfish and nefarious purpose, but in fact that's what it can do in certain species, such as the castrator barnacles. And the way these barnacles go about achieving their goal is totally terrifying. The Sacculina barnacle enters a host crab by finding a break in its claw joints and using it as an entrance. The barnacle then sheds its own hard shell and squeezes its now flexible self in, which right there shows just how clever this creepy creature is, that it would be able to identify and exploit a weak spot in its target's defenses. Once reaching inside the crab, it'll go and do its parasitic thing by leeching off what the crab eats and using the crab's body to go and reproduce itself within the host. If the crab is female, the parasitic barnacle forces it to care and nurture for the millions of barnacle larvae living inside of it, as if they were her own. But if the crab is male, it will be, feminized in order to make it do the same thing. Talk about emasculating. But the creepiness doesn't end there. The parasite is able to literally alter the body of the crab by injecting it with all sorts of hormones so that it'll have room to house all of the millions of eggs within. So, to recap, it finds a way into the crab, steals nutrients from it, lays millions of eggs within it, uses hormones to adjust the crab so that it can hold on to more eggs, and it'll even force the crab to take care of it. That's a truly powerful parasite. Number 5. Green-banded broodsac. Here is another example of a terrifying worm that is powerful enough to cause a creature to literally lose its own mind and be augmented to fit the parasite's needs and do its bidding. The green-banded broodsac is a sinister type of flatworm, one that has a penchant for infecting snails. The green-banded broodsac begins its parasitic conquest by swimming its way into the stalks of the snail, basically the snail's eyes, so that they swell up and look like juicy, pulsing, brightly colored caterpillars. That sounds confusing and just plain torturous. But this is only the beginning of the flatworm's plan. Now that the snail is infected, it can be manipulated by the flatworm, because you see, the worm can now control the snail and force it to put itself out there in terms of exposure. Exposure to what, you might ask? Exposure to birds and other predators. The worm wants the snail to be eaten by birds because then the worm can continue its conquest and reproduce and then start the parasitic cycle of madness all over again. In many ways, this is the true power of parasites, being able to manipulate others into a chain of carefully planned and calculated events that leads to them being able to reproduce and infect many others. Number 4. Ladybird wasp parasite. While it may be called a lady, this wasp is anything but ladylike. It's not only very clever in how it plots its takeover, but it is extremely manipulative and able to use other creatures to protect itself and its eggs. You see, the ladybird wasp is actually smart enough to have a little bit of self-awareness about its place on the food chain. It's only a small insect, and it's very susceptible to attacks from larger predators that want to eat it. In order to prevent this, the wasp takes control and lives inside a creature that'll make other predators think twice about attacking. The most common victim, the ladybird beetle. The ladybird beetle is a force to be reckoned with, and not a very attractive dining option on the food chain. When disturbed, the beetle emits a disgusting poison, and their hard shell with its bright red and black spots scares off many potential predators. However, the parasitic wasp has a way around this. The ladybird beetle doesn't really stand a chance against the parasitic wasp and its clever plan. With a single sting, the wasp infects the ladybird beetle with only a single egg. The wasp egg will grow on slowly within the ladybird beetle and eventually hatch. Then, when it hatches, it'll eat its way out of the ladybird beetle's flesh. Next, the newborn wasp will spin a cocoon between the legs of the beetle like a secret chamber hidden in a tough fortress. The ladybird beetle is now essentially a bodyguard to the cocoon of the manipulative parasitic wasp. Meanwhile, the beetle is still alive despite everything, and it will thrash and twitch its limbs at any predator who might approach, protecting the wasp and its cocoon. It's not clear why it behaves like this, but scientists think that it may actually be triggered by venom left by the wasp larva. Either way, it's quite an ordeal for the ladybird beetle, and yet an incredibly clever adaptation from the parasitic wasp itself. Number 3. Emerald cockroach wasp. The emerald cockroach wasp has a metallic body that glows an eerie emerald with bright crimson markings on 2 of its legs. Found in the tropical regions of Asia, Africa, and the Pacific Islands, it is a beautiful insect, but pity the cockroach that crosses its path. When it finds its target cockroach, despite the roach being at least 6 times the size of the tiny wasp, the wasp will use its unique sting on the cockroach and essentially totally paralyze it. Once the cockroach can't move at all, the wasp will move on to the next stage of the infection. The wasp's plan now is to inject special elixirs right into the immobilized brain of the cockroach. Once injected and infected, the cockroach is nothing more than a zombie, one that the wasp can use for, like many of the others, free daycare. And by use, I mean the wasp will literally be able to guide the cockroach to a nest area that the wasp has set up. Then, the wasp will inject all of its eggs into the abdomen of the zombified cockroach. Although the cockroach technically has the ability to break free, it doesn't because the wasp's control over its mind is so strong that the roach won't even move its body without the wasp's specific directions. So, once those wasp larvae hatch, the cockroach is totally helpless and its role switches from being the free wasp egg daycare to the baby wasp all-you-can-eat buffet. They'll go to town and eat the whole cockroach alive, literally bursting out of its body when the time comes. You should pity the cockroach that comes across this wasp. Its fate is not kind. Number 2. TOXOPLASMOSIS. Parasites are very complex entities that use a wide range of terrifying tactics to get things done the way they want them done. Toxoplasmosis is no different. It's merely a single-celled entity, but don't let that fool you. Toxoplasmosis is famous for just how powerful its parasitic control is, and how it targets and infects rats and mice so that they'll purposefully get eaten by cats, and thus, toxoplasmosis will be able to continue to spread and reproduce. Now, usually, rats and mice fear cats, which makes sense considering they have had a predator and prey relationship for many millions of years. Rats and mice have actually evolved to have extremely sharp senses that warn them if they're about to be attacked by a cat. But when infected by the toxoplasmosis parasite, the rats and mice become irresistibly attracted to a pheromone in the cat's urine. The animal sense for self-preservation lessens. Instead of hiding in sorts of nooks and crannies, the rodents begin actively sniffing around the feline predator's territory, putting the rodents at high risk and the parasite on a one-way ticket to its ultimate destination, the cat's stomach. What might horrify some is the fact that toxoplasmosis isn't just found in rodents and cats. No, the parasite is actually found in humans, and for those of us with pet cats, it's pretty common too. It's estimated that 60% of the time, this parasite is within the human body. Now you're probably wondering, can toxoplasmosis negatively affect humans the same way it affects rodents? Well, scarily, scientists are not really sure. Some studies suggest it's highly possible, and some even go so far as to say that those with schizophrenia are more likely to respond to the influence of the parasite, but it's not clear if that's just a correlation to the parasite in them or something else entirely. If you're worried about your cat giving you toxoplasmosis, let me know in the comments below. Why or why not? Then remember to subscribe to The Biggest if you haven't already. Number 1. Rabies. And now, for the number 1 parasite that pretty much everyone knows about and knows to fear, rabies. The reason that this particular entity is so bad is because it's technically not a parasite, but it definitely acts like one. It's notorious because it can travel from animals to humans so easily and cause all sorts of wild behavioral issues. It makes animals, usually dogs and bats, and occasionally humans, more aggressive, compelling them to spread the virus through biting and scratching. This is why people are urged to be careful around wild dogs that they don't know, because if they carry rabies, there's a very real possibility they will lash out and infect you. Rabies is so bad that it's been the source of various myths and conspiracies, usually theorizing about what the horrible things it'll really do to you. Thank you all for watching. What did you think of this look at the real mind-controlling parasites and entities in the world today? Are you shocked that so many of these things exist? Are you glad that some of them are incredibly far away from where you are now? I know I am. Let everyone know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe. See you next time on The Biggest.